The silent moment of Donnie Yen. The night was quiet, but inside the studio, the lights were bright. Cameras were everywhere. Voices echoed from one corner to another, and everyone was busy preparing for the next scene. Keanu Reeves stood calmly near the set, his face carrying that gentle strength people always noticed in him. Sandra Bullock had just walked past, offering a kind smile to the crew. Everything looked normal on the outside, but inside the heart of one man, there was a heavy storm. Donnie Yen sat alone in the far corner, his eyes fixed on the floor. He had spent years building his craft, showing discipline and giving everything to cinema. Yet here, in this moment, he felt invisible. The laughter shared between Keanu and Sandra did not reach him. The respect flowing around the room seemed to pass by him as if he were not even present. Every clap of appreciation, every whisper of admiration, it all circled around him without touching his spirit. It was not jealousy in the sharp sense, but it was the painful feeling of being left out, the kind that quietly eats a man's dignity. The director's voice called out instructions. The crew rushed to adjust lights, move props, and prepare the scene. Donnie watched as the spotlight once again centered on Keanu. It was not Keanu's fault, but the ache inside Donnie grew deeper. He thought of the countless hours he had trained, the years he had sacrificed, and the struggles he had faced alone. Still, he now felt like a shadow in a world where only a few stars were allowed to shine. But then, something unexpected happened. Keanu noticed. He always had the ability to sense things others missed. As he glanced across the room, his eyes met Donnie's. There was no noise in that look, no grand gesture, just a quiet understanding. Keanu walked slowly toward him, his steps unhurried, his presence calm. The crew barely noticed because they were too busy, but Donnie did. He lifted his eyes, confused, almost defensive, unsure if Keanu would truly care. Keanu sat down beside him. He did not speak right away. Silence carried its own power, and Keanu understood that. Finally, in his gentle tone, he said, "Sometimes the brightest lights can make us feel smaller, but I see you, Donnie, and I want you to know your presence here matters more than anyone realizes." Donnie's throat tightened. No one had spoken to him in such a direct, honest way. He had always been the fighter, the disciplined man, the one who never showed weakness. But now, Keanu's words touched a part of him that he had locked away for too long. He wanted to answer, but his voice betrayed him, caught between pride and pain. All he could manage was a quiet nod, but his eyes were filled with emotions he could not hide. The scene continued to move around them, but in that small corner of the studio, a bond was quietly forming. Sandra, who had always been sensitive to emotions, noticed it from a distance. She did not interrupt, but her heart softened, knowing she was witnessing a rare moment of kindness. This was not just about movies. This was about dignity, about reminding someone that they were seen, that their struggles had meaning, and that respect was not given by fame alone, but by the humanity of those who chose to give it. The night went on, but Donnie's heart was no longer the same. He still carried doubts, but Keanu's gesture had planted a seed inside him, a seed of healing, of hope, and of resilience. For the first time in many days, he felt that maybe he was not just a shadow. Maybe he still had his place, not just in the story being filmed, but in the greater story of life. And deep inside, he silently promised himself. He would not give up. He would not let the feeling of being left out destroy him, because even in the most lonely moments, a simple act of respect could change everything.
The weight of silence. The next morning, the studio was filled with the usual rush. Lights were being tested, sound engineers adjusted microphones, and assistants hurried across the set with papers and scripts in their hands. Everyone seemed to have a role. Everyone seemed to belong. But Donnie Yen still felt the echo of the night before. Keanu's words had touched him, but the feeling of being invisible was not something that disappeared overnight. It was still there, heavy, pressing against his chest like a weight he could not shake off. He walked slowly toward the preparation area, nodding politely at a few crew members. Some smiled back, but others were too busy to even notice. The truth was simple. Respect was something earned in silence, and Donnie knew he had worked his entire life for it. Yet, in moments like this, it felt as if all his efforts were forgotten the moment he stood next to someone like Keanu Reeves. Keanu's kindness had given him a glimpse of dignity, but now, in the daylight, he feared it might only have been a passing comfort. The director called everyone together for the next sequence. The scene was demanding, a combination of martial arts choreography and emotional dialogue. Donnie had always been known for his discipline in martial arts, for the way his movements carried both precision and beauty. But today, his mind was clouded. As the cameras rolled, his timing faltered, his foot missed the rhythm, his hand struck a second too early, and his eyes betrayed distraction. "Cut!" the director shouted, frustration sharp in his voice. The crew sighed, some shook their heads, and others whispered quietly to each other. The truth was simple. Respect was something earned in silence, and Donnie knew he had worked his entire life for it. Yet, in moments like this, it felt as if all his efforts were forgotten the moment he stood next to someone like Keanu Reeves. Keanu's kindness had given him a glimpse of dignity, but now, in the daylight, he feared it might only have been a passing comfort. The set prepared for another take. Sandra Bullock stepped closer. She had watched from the sidelines, her heart quietly stirred. She knew the loneliness of being overlooked, the pain of giving everything and still feeling invisible. With gentle sincerity, she added, "Donnie, I want you to know something. When I watch you work, I don't see an extra. I see someone who gives every move, every word, every breath with truth. Maybe not everyone says it out loud, but some of us notice. I notice." Her words were like a bridge reaching out to him. Donnie blinked, surprised, caught between gratitude and disbelief. Two of the most respected people in the room, Keanu and Sandra, were reminding him of his worth. He felt a quiet warmth begin to spread inside him, though the weight of his doubt still remained. The cameras rolled again. This time, Donnie moved differently. His strikes carried precision, his eyes focused with sharp determination. He was not perfect, but he was present, fully alive in the scene. The crew nodded silently, and even the director's face softened as he said, "Better, much better." When the take ended, Donnie walked off set, sweat on his forehead and breath heavy. But this time, his heart carried something new, a fragile thread of belief that perhaps he was not as invisible as he thought. Yet deep down, he knew the journey was not over. Respect was not given once and kept forever. It had to be earned again and again.
The crack in the mirror. The following days moved quickly, but inside Donnie, time felt heavy and slow. The studio remained filled with laughter, movement, and energy. Yet every smile reminded him of the invisible gap he carried. Yes, Keanu and Sandra had given him words of kindness. And yes, they had reminded him of his worth. But doubt is like a shadow. It never leaves so easily. Each morning, he looked at himself in the mirror, and though he saw the strong face of a fighter, the reflection felt cracked. During one of the rehearsals, a group of younger actors whispered among themselves. They admired Keanu's calm strength. They praised Sandra's emotional grace. And when it came to Donnie, their tone softened into jokes. "He's too serious," one of them muttered. "He doesn't know how to relax on set." Another laughed quietly, shaking his head as if Donnie were out of place. Donnie heard them. He did not react, but the words pierced through him like quiet blades. He reminded himself to breathe, to stay calm. But a voice inside whispered, "They are right. You are not like them. You will always be the outsider." That evening, the director arranged a closed rehearsal for a complicated action sequence. The scene required Keanu and Donnie to fight side by side, blending martial arts with emotional dialogue. For the audience, it would be breathtaking, but for Donnie, it was a test he could not afford to fail. During one of the rehearsals, his movements were sharp and precise. Years of training spoke through every strike and every step, but something still felt wrong. His body was perfect, but his spirit carried hesitation. The director noticed. He paused the rehearsal and shook his head. "Donnie, your moves are strong, but your face, it's not alive. You look like a machine. The audience must feel your soul, not just your skill." Those words cut deeper than the whispers. Donnie clenched his fists quietly, his pride aching. He had spent decades proving himself through discipline, and now, to be told he looked empty, it felt unbearable. Keanu, sensing the storm, stepped forward. He looked at the director and then at Donnie. "Maybe it's not about correction," he said calmly. "Maybe it's about giving him space to breathe. Sometimes silence hides emotions that even the actor himself doesn't know how to show." The room grew quiet. Sandra, standing nearby, added gently, "He's carrying something heavy. You can see it in his eyes. Maybe the story we are telling isn't just on the screen. Maybe it's also happening right here." The director sighed, but nodded. "Take a break. We'll try again tomorrow." Donnie walked out of the studio, his steps heavy. Outside, the air was cool, and the night sky stretched wide above him. He sat on a bench, his hands trembling slightly. He whispered to himself, "Why do I feel this way? Why do I always fight shadows?" It was then that Keanu appeared quietly, almost as if he had followed, but without forcing his presence. He sat beside Donnie, the same way he had on the first night. No grand speeches, no heavy advice, just presence. After a moment, Keanu spoke softly. "You don't need to fight alone. People see your strength, but sometimes they forget you are human too. I haven't forgotten." Donnie looked at him, his eyes tired, but inside something cracked open. The weight of silence, the whispers, the judgment, they were all wounds he had carried alone. But now, here was a man who refused to let him sit in the dark. "I don't know how to be seen," Donnie admitted quietly. "I only know how to fight." Keanu nodded, his voice steady. "Then let us fight differently this time. Not against people, not against yourself. Let us fight for your dignity, together." The words settled deep inside Donnie's heart. For the first time, he felt the possibility that this pain might become strength, that this struggle might shape not just his performance, but his very soul. But what neither of them knew was that a new challenge was about to come, one that would test Donnie in ways he never expected.
The breaking point. The next day began with a heavy tension in the air. Everyone on set seemed restless. The director had announced that the upcoming scene would be filmed in front of a live audience, invited guests, and even journalists. It was unusual, but the studio wanted to create excitement and show confidence in the project. For many, it was thrilling. For Donnie, it was terrifying. His heart pounded as he stood in the rehearsal space. The whispers of the young actors still echoed in his memory. The director's sharp words about his empty face replayed again and again. The thought of failing in front of strangers filled him with dread. He had always carried the strength of a fighter, but this was not about punches or kicks. This was about being seen, truly seen, in a way that scared him most. The audience began to arrive, filling the small viewing gallery. Flashes of cameras lit up the room, and the quiet buzz of conversation added to the pressure. Donnie adjusted his costume, his hands shaking slightly. He wanted to hide the trembling, but Keanu noticed. He stepped close, lowering his voice so only Donnie could hear. "Remember," Keanu said gently, "you're not alone. We stand together in this." Donnie nodded, but inside, fear still clawed at him. The director shouted, "Action!" The scene began with Keanu stepping into frame, his presence calm and powerful. Sandra followed, her expression carrying quiet intensity. Then it was Donnie's turn. He entered the scene, his body moving with perfect discipline. Every strike was sharp, every block precise. Yet once again, his face was guarded, his soul hidden. The director's voice cut through the air. "Stop, Donnie! This isn't enough. You look like you're reciting moves, not living them. Give me your heart, not just your skill." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Whispers began to rise. Some nodded in agreement with the director. Others simply looked curious. Donnie's chest tightened. Humiliation burned inside him. He wanted to scream, to shout that he had given his life to this craft, that no one understood the weight he carried. Instead, his lips trembled, and silence trapped him. The director shook his head and muttered, "Maybe he isn't ready for this." Those words were louder than thunder in Donnie's heart. They shattered what little confidence he had left. For a moment, he felt his whole career slipping away. But before the silence could consume him completely, Keanu stepped forward. His voice was steady, that there was fire in his eyes. "Don't speak of him like he's disposable," Keanu said firmly. "He's not just ready, he's stronger than anyone here realizes. What you see as silence is not weakness, it's depth. Give him respect, and you'll see it shine." The entire room froze. Even the director seemed caught off guard by Keanu's words. Sandra stepped closer too, her eyes on the audience, her voice calm but unshakable. Great performances don't come from perfect technique alone. They come from honesty, and Donnie has more honesty in his silence than most of us have in our words. The audience grew quiet. The weight of their defense hung in the air. Donnie's eyes filled, though he tried to hide it. Never before had anyone spoken for him like this. Never had anyone fought for his dignity so openly. The director hesitated, then sighed. "Fine, one more take. Donnie, show me what they believe in." Donnie closed his eyes. A storm inside him raged, the whispers, the humiliation, the doubt, all of it pressed against him. But then he remembered Keanu's words. Fight differently this time. Not against people, not against yourself. Fight for your dignity. When the camera rolled again, something shifted. Donnie moved with the same precision, but this time his face carried fire. His eyes were alive, his expression raw with emotion. Every strike was not just a move, it was a message. Every glance carried his struggle, his pain, his resilience. The audience leaned forward, captivated. Even the director, once critical, now watched with open eyes. When the scene ended, silence filled the room. Then slowly, the audience began to clap. It was not just polite applause, it was genuine, deep, and powerful. Donnie stood there, breathing hard, his body shaking from the release. For the first time in a long time, he felt something he had been craving: respect. Yet even in this moment of triumph, he knew the journey was not finished. Applause was fleeting, but dignity had to be carried every day.
The shadow at home. The applause from the studio echoed in Donnie's memory as he walked out into the night air. He should have felt proud. He should have felt strong. But instead, his heart carried a strange emptiness. Yes, the audience had clapped. Yes, the director had finally nodded. But deep inside, the silence of years could not be erased in a single moment. He wondered if respect given in one room would fade the moment he stepped outside of it. He drove home quietly. The city lights blurred past his window, glowing like distant stars, but he barely noticed them.
His thoughts were heavy, his chest still tight. He remembered Keanu's hand on his shoulder, Sandra's words of belief, the applause of strangers. All of it mattered, but none of it filled the space he carried inside, the space of loneliness. When he reached home, the quietness of the house surrounded him. The walls felt colder than usual, the silence deeper. He sat down at the table, staring at a half-empty glass of water. The reflection in the glass showed his face, tired and older than he wanted to admit. He whispered to himself, "Why does respect feel so fragile? Why do I still feel like I am not enough?" His phone buzzed. It was a message from his sister. She lived far away, but her words were short and sharp. "You always chase the spotlight, but you forget your family. Father isn't well. He asked about you. Do you even care?" Donnie froze. The words struck deeper than any director's criticism or actor's whispers. His father had been the reason he first picked up martial arts, the reason he learned discipline, the reason he carried strength. And now, while Donnie chased films and struggled for dignity, his father was suffering. He felt guilt wash over him like a tide. How could he fight for respect in front of strangers while the man who gave him everything was waiting in pain? The next morning, he boarded a flight to see his family. He told the studio he needed a short break, though he gave no details. Keanu and Sandra did not ask questions, but their eyes showed they understood. When he arrived at his childhood home, the sight broke him. His father was frail, sitting quietly in a wooden chair, his breathing slow but steady. The house smelled of old wood and medicine. Donnie knelt beside him, his heart heavy with unspoken words. "Father," he whispered, "I should have been here sooner. I thought if I made the world respect me, it would honor you too. But maybe I forgot the real meaning." His father opened his eyes slowly. Though weak, they still carried the sharpness of wisdom. With a faint smile, he said, "Respect is not something you demand, my son. It is something you give. When you honor others, when you show kindness, when you live with humility, that is when respect returns to you." Tears filled Donnie's eyes. He realized that all this time he had been fighting for respect as if it were a prize, but his father reminded him it was not about receiving, it was about giving. That night, as Donnie sat beside his father, he remembered every moment on set. He remembered the whispers, the doubts, the humiliation. But now he also remembered Keanu's quiet defense, Sandra's gentle encouragement, the director's final nod, and he saw them in a new light. They were not just giving him respect, they were reflecting back the respect he had silently shown through years of discipline and humility. For the first time, Donnie began to understand that dignity was not found in applause or in headlines. It was found in the way one chose to carry themselves, in silence, in kindness, in resilience. Yet, as the days passed, Donnie's father grew weaker. The fear of losing him weighed heavily. Donnie now faced a challenge no stage, no camera, no audience could prepare him for. The challenge of saying goodbye to the man who had given him his path. And in that quiet, painful moment, Donnie would need more strength than he had ever needed before.
The last lesson. The days moved slowly, each one heavy with worry. Donnie stayed by his father's side, watching as the man who had once stood tall and strong now struggled with each breath. The house was quiet except for the sound of the clock on the wall and the occasional cough from the old man's chest. Donnie tried to be strong,
but inside he felt a breaking that he had never known before. He could face cameras. He could face critics. He could face humiliation. But he did not know how to face the thought of losing his father. One evening, as the sky outside turned orange with the setting sun, his father called him closer. His voice was weak, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of truth. "Donnie," he said, "I have watched you fight all your life. You fight with discipline, with strength, with silence. But the greatest fight is not with others, not even with yourself. It is the fight to stay humble when the world lifts you, and to stay hopeful when the world leaves you behind." Tears rolled down Donnie's face as he held his father's hand. "I thought respect came from being seen, from being recognized," he admitted, his voice shaking. "But maybe I was wrong." His father smiled faintly. "Respect comes when you give it first. Dignity is not what people hand to you. It is what you carry in your own heart." That night, Keanu called. His voice was calm, steady, carrying the same quiet strength he always showed. "I heard about your father," he said softly. "I don't want you to carry this alone. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones off the stage." Sandra sent a message too. It was simple, only a few words. "Your presence with him matters more than any performance. Stay close. That is your true role now." She read her words again and again, letting them sink into him. For the first time he realized how deeply they both understood him, not just as an actor, but as a man, as a son. In the following days, Donnie spoke less and listened more. He listened to his father's quiet stories, to the memories of their family, to the lessons hidden between pauses of breath. Sometimes his father would drift into silence, and Donnie would simply sit there, holding his hand, giving him the respect he had once thought the world denied him. Then, one morning, as the sky outside turned orange with the setting sun, his father whispered his final words. "Carry your dignity with kindness. That will always be enough." Donnie's heart broke as his father's hand grew still. He wept quietly, not with anger, but with love, with sorrow, and with the deep understanding that this was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. When he returned to the set a week later, everyone noticed the change in him. His eyes carried a depth that had not been there before. His movements were steady, his voice calm, but behind it all there was a quiet fire. He no longer performed to be seen, he performed to honor something greater, something his father had left within him. Keanu looked at him and gave a small nod. Sandra smiled softly, as if to say, "We see you now, not just the actor, but the man." And in that silent moment, Donnie felt something he had searched for his whole life. Not the applause of strangers, not the validation of critics, but the true dignity that comes when respect rises from within. Yet destiny had one more twist waiting, something that would test if Donnie could hold on to this dignity when the world once again tried to tear it away.
The final test. The studio was alive with excitement when Donnie returned. The final scenes of the film were about to be shot, and the entire crew knew this was the climax that would decide whether the movie touched hearts or faded into forgetfulness. Donnie walked onto the set with quiet strength. His father's last words echoed inside him like a guiding light. Carry your dignity with kindness. That will always be enough. The director greeted him with a short nod, but behind the eyes there was doubt. Some crew members whispered, wondering if Donnie's grief would weaken his performance. Others, remembering his earlier struggles, quietly predicted he would fail under pressure. Donnie heard the whispers, but did not let them sink into him this time. He knew now that respect was not built from their words, it was built from how he chose to carry himself. The scene was intense. It was not only about action, but about heart. Keanu's character was written to show quiet resilience, Sandra's role to reveal strength and compassion, and Donnie's role was to carry both discipline and vulnerability together. The cameras rolled. Donnie moved with precision, every strike smooth, every pause filled with meaning. But when the emotional line came, the moment that had haunted him in rehearsals, the silence inside him finally broke. Instead of forcing expression, he let his grief, his love, his father's lesson flow through his eyes. The words he spoke in the scene were simple, but they carried the weight of everything he had lived. The set grew silent. Even when the director called cut, no one moved right away. The crew stared at him, stunned, their whispers gone. One by one, people began to clap. It was not the applause of strangers this time. It was respect, deep and genuine. The director, once his harshest critic, walked up to him and said softly, "That was not acting, that was truth. You carried the soul of the story." Donnie bowed his head slightly, humility in his eyes. He did not smile widely or soak in the praise. Instead, he whispered, "Thank you," because now he understood that dignity was not about shouting. It was about silence, filled with meaning. When the day ended, Keanu came to him, placing a steady hand on his shoulder as he had many times before. "You found it," he said gently. "Not in the lights, not in the applause, but in yourself." Sandra stood beside them, her voice warm and sincere. And the world saw it too, not just the fighter, not just the actor, but the man. Donnie looked at them both. For years he had carried the weight of being unseen, of being treated as a shadow. But now, standing between two people who had defended him, who had reminded him of his worth, he finally felt whole. He realized his father had been right. Dignity was not something the world gave. It was something one carried within, even in silence, even when left out, even when forgotten. And when carried with kindness, it became a light that others could not ignore. As the final lights of the set dimmed, Donnie walked outside into the cool night. The stars above seemed brighter, the air softer. He whispered into the sky, "Father, I understand now. I will carry it forward, with humility, with kindness, with strength." And in that quiet moment, Donnie felt no longer left out. He felt complete,